Chapter 7: Finding Peace of Mind After Losing Someone Important. So with this chapter we're getting into something that might be controversial because I want to talk a little bit about dealing with death and losing people in general. You know, in the previous episode I talked about my own addiction with alcohol, and it actually came about because of my own mother's suicide, because at the time I was 18 years old. So you can imagine that's kind of a very traumatizing event. It's not something that you just brush off. It's a very painful thing to experience in your life, no matter what age you are. Now I came to realize some more myself that it's sort of like being a caterpillar, you know, going into a cocoon, and then, as they describe it on the internet, one day the caterpillar stops eating, hangs upside down from a twig or a leaf, spins itself into a silky cocoon. Within its protective casing, the caterpillar radically transforms its body, eventually emerging as a butterfly or moth. So that's kind of symbolic for the way I would look at it, and a way I would describe it in your own life is if you're troubled by stuff that happened in the past, traumatizing events, it's kind of like being a caterpillar, and learning these ideas, you kind of symbolically learn to spread your wings and fly towards the fulfillment of your own dreams. You learn to radically transform your own life by applying these ideas, and that's exactly the reason why I wanted to share it with you guys, because it's one of the things I promised I would do for my mother. I told her before she died, if I ever find a way for people to live a happy and successful life, I would share it. And I wouldn't just share it with friends or my own family in private, I would share it with humanity itself. So you can be like that caterpillar, turning into something much more powerful and beautiful. You're not going to turn into a butterfly. I would suggest if you ever see a person that is in a real physical cocoon, well, maybe you should just run away from them, because that might be a sign of some alien life form going on there. You get the idea here, it's all symbolic. So with this chapter, you know, you can just listen to it, read it, and don't think too much about it. That's kind of what I want to suggest. If you have an open mind, just consider my ideas concerning losing someone through death and what it could mean for us. But in the end, the whole point here is to make sure that you don't get stuck in negative patterns, because they can and usually lead to very negative habit patterns in and of itself. So we might end up in addiction. Maybe you are struggling with addiction, or you know somebody that is struggling with addiction. Well, these ideas might be able to inspire them sort of to look at it in a different way. And that's what it's all meant to do. Now, this may be a controversial chapter, but I wanted to include it for a very specific reason. There are many people on this planet who may feel completely lost after losing someone. It's for them I dedicate this chapter. It's my hope it will give them a new outlook on their future. It's never easy when we lose someone, but at the same time it should never cause us to lose grip over our entire lives. My heart goes out to all who are struggling, whose tears might not be understood by many, yet speak volumes of the importance of finding a more hopeful outlook, so we will never go down with our own sadness. When I talk about losing someone in this chapter, it includes multiple forms. The loss of someone through death, the loss of someone through a broken relationship, and the loss of someone that was once a dear friend. It doesn't matter which form it took, they have one thing in common: we lost someone important to us. Is it truly as bad as it seems, or is there still a possibility for us to find hope? Hope for a better future, even though the person in question is no longer by our side. I think we can all agree there is hope, but the real struggle lies in achieving that place of inner peace and strength. In some cases the grief is so intense it stays with us for years. I hope you're not suffering like that, but if you are, I have good news. Everything you think you've lost is an illusion. You think you lost something, but you can't really lose anything at all. It seems like we've lost something because of the current perception we hold. Does this approach mean you wouldn't have any tears when you lose someone? No. There's nothing wrong with us if we cry. Obviously our grief is very important in order to process the pain we feel. We should never try to suppress it or ignore it. We do, however, walk a risk if we don't learn how to process our sadness in the right way. If we can't handle our own sadness and negative emotions, it might be expressed in all sorts of harmful ways for both mind and body. Think of all the people who are addicted to alcohol, drugs, or medication. More often than not, people who are addicted end up in this way because they couldn't handle their own struggles correctly. I'm talking from personal experience as well, when it comes down to alcohol, but I've also seen other people struggle with medication addiction, Like they have to take it in order to function. It's like they became worse off than they were before they took the alcohol, the drugs, or medication. That's the main point here. This can lead us to very, very dangerous roads for our own sanity. Thankfully, I found a way to overcome my own addiction, but it took me quite a few years. I hope you won't have to suffer for as long as I did. It's not just sadness that might turn someone to substance abuse. It's tied to all negative emotions we can experience, as long as we don't know the right way to deal with them. Now comes the question, how do you get rid of the negativity you might currently face? If you lost someone through death, a failed relationship or friendship, how would you find peace and happiness all over again? It's very important we find the answer. If we don't, it might be a slow and painful process. If you've been struggling with your own grief for a long time, odds are you don't know the answer yet. But the solution is rather easy to grasp. First of all, we need to change our perception. Whenever we look at the situation only seeing and remembering the person we lost, it can't bring us anything positive. If we change our perception, so instead of us seeing only the person we lost, we focus it on the beautiful things these people have added to our lives when they were still with us, this will shift our emotions for the better. Can you name one positive thing about the person you've now lost? Something they shared or brought to you when they were still in your life? Even if the person in question broke your heart, as is more often the case with a breakup or divorce, regardless, can you name one positive thing about this person? This may seem pointless or contradicting, but believe me, what we're doing through this approach is influencing our own emotions for the better. You don't have to tell the person in question anything about what you're doing, but we don't want to become the victim of our own negative emotions. Having a negative outlook on the situation can only do one thing: cause more negative emotions to arise. Your first response might be that there's nothing positive about the person at all, but is this really true? If that is the truth, these people would never have been a part of your life. Since they were a part of your life at one point, they did add something to it. It offered you something beneficial at that time. Whenever you can remember the positive things they added to your life, you're using your mind in the right way. This is the method that helps us to look back at the positive instead of the negative. Now, I'm aware this might seem to only work for people that lost someone after a breakup, but there's also a lot of people out there who blame someone for leaving them after they died. Now, this is essentially the same problem we face as if someone broke up with us. Death is even more tragic, don't get me wrong. I face it myself, but it's a real thing. People might actually blame the dead person for leaving them, even though the person in question might have not even been able to, make sure it didn't happen, like to prevent their death. If it was an accident, something that just happened out of nowhere, it's still kind of bizarre how we, the ones grieving, might blame the dead person for leaving us. And that's not a good way to live either. I'm aware a phase of anger is part of processing our own grief. The real goal for us is to reach a point of acceptance. Without the proper guidance, people can get stuck in their own sadness, anger, or a combination of both. We can only accept the situation when we change our perception. We learn to make peace with the fact they are no longer with us physically. This chapter can help you become stronger at this. It's daring you to change your perception, so you start to look for all the positive things they brought into your life when they were still with you. If we do this consciously, it will train us to look towards the positive instead of the negative. As long as we face the negative, we might feel like a victim. This in turn causes us to feel like victims in other areas of our life as well. Doesn't seem that great, right? Instead, I'm assuming you want to be free of the pain and sadness. At the start of this chapter I mentioned this could be controversial, and it's because of the following. I felt inspired to approach this aspect of life from a different angle. If you lost someone through death, the same person that died lives on in our own imagination. That is where you will find them. This idea on its own might be absurd. After all, we're used to treating our imagination like it's something fake or abstract. It has to become clear to us that the imagination is the root cause of all that we create on Earth. I can tell you from personal experience, I've talked to people inside my own imagination who are physically not with us anymore. These conversations inside imagination are just as real as ones you have in your day-to-day life. It's because of this experience I felt compelled to write about it. When you're ready for this, you too will be able to talk to the loved ones inside your own imagination, the ones who passed away. Have you ever heard someone that they saw a person in their dreams that was no longer alive? Some even say they see this dead person when awake. I've heard stories from others like this and I've personally experienced it. Now you might have experienced this, but maybe you don't dare to admit it to anybody because you think you're crazy. Or maybe you heard others talk about it and you thought they were crazy when they told you this. But these stories, you can find them all over the world. People have these experiences, and I have had them myself, and it's not because we're crazy, but because the universe is kind of trying to show us the oneness of it all. That you're never losing anything because it all exists in your imagination. It goes on there, and you'll find it there, because with an awakened mind, you realize again how connected everything is to each other on a very energetic level. Now this might be a bit too difficult for you to grasp at this moment, so you just listen to it and just read the text and just kind of contemplate it. But if it's too much for now, don't worry about it, because this is just one of those aspects of life, as I said at the beginning of this audio recording as well, that we just have to learn to deal with. Now we want to deal with properly so we don't get stuck in the negativity while we're pursuing our biggest goals in life and getting exactly what we want while we're still alive in this physical body. Now you wish you could talk to them again in this life, but it will never happen, at least not physically. You will find them inside your imagination. It's the same place where I had conversations with my own mother, who is no longer with us. These people are assumed to be dead, and at first it shocked me when I had my first conversation with her. These days I simply see it as something positive. Again, you might think it's bizarre because it's all pure fantasy, but what does it really matter if they are just as real as the conversations you now hold when you're awake? In spite of your own sadness, remember that you can and will see your loved ones when you're ready. Once they show themselves to you, you'll discover you never truly lost anyone. You can only do stuff physically in the dimension of time and space, but your mind operates beyond these limits. Whenever I would miss someone, I know I can talk to them inside my own imagination. These conversations can bring peace of mind. It's because of these personal experiences I came to the conclusion that whenever we say a person lives on in our heart, might as well be changed to they live on inside our imagination. Your imagination is your spiritual heart. It's the place that will show you anything you could ever desire. It will also help you to get what you want. Regardless of what we might think of this approach at first, the real goal with all of this is to make sure we feel good and not bad. These are methods for us to learn to take control over our minds and all aspects of our life. The sooner we learn and truly grasp these ideas, the better we'll be able to handle the situation whenever we lose anyone in life. It's also important to understand there's nothing wrong if you feel sad, if you are in tears, but let's not forget, our sadness is never meant to pull us down. There's many people on our planet who are completely lost after losing someone important. Their future seems very bleak indeed. I hope this chapter made you think. It's full of hints about how we can positively change our own minds concerning any situation we face. If you lost someone through death, you'll find them again in your imagination. If you lost someone after a breakup, remember to think about all the good things they brought into your life. Also, never forget, sooner or later you can find a new partner, if that's what you want. If you lost important friends, again, remember the good times you shared, because if you never had any, they wouldn't have been your friends to begin with. Regardless of the pain you may feel, the tears that might still flow, slowly but surely try to think of the positive, and learn to look forward to all the good things the future can still bring to you. Now let's go over the questions for Chapter 7. Now, sooner or later we'll all be confronted with a form of loss, whether this is through the death of a loved one, a relationship that didn't work out, or losing an important friend or contact. You could go as far as to say people experience loss when working on their dreams. For example, when someone temporarily experiences less success as time goes on. The following questions will help explain to you where your focus should lie during these moments. The first question: on what should we focus our attention when dealing with loss? The second question: what would you advise someone if they're having difficulty reaching a place of acceptance after loss? That's a very interesting and deep question, to be really honest, so it might take you some time to figure them out. Now, to summarize Chapter 7, ultimately our goal is to not get stuck in negative events, whether that's by losing someone after they passed away, a failed loving relationship or friendship. We always have to keep in mind that we possess the ability to guide our own emotions. As long as we're only focused on what we have lost, we won't be able to feel positive about our lives. The pain and sadness we may feel is not bad, but we also don't want it to influence us in such a way that we can't think clearly for years, because that's where some people live. Because of that, our future might start to look very bleak indeed, instead of hopeful, and that's what we're after. So in this case, the grieving process is a real thing. You have to go through it, and that's alright. But you don't want it to keep you stuck in negative patterns of the mind. That is ultimately the purpose and goal behind this chapter, reminding you of that fact.